Think about buildings historically, just about all our buildings were sustainable, right? We used to build with natural materials, live in, the context was fairly rural. And even when it did get a bit urban, barely some lights were being used in our buildings. It was pretty minimal.
Welcome to the Blue Circle, and thank you all for joining in. It's such a big privilege and a pleasure to reconnect with everyone, our distinguished panelists who are handpicked because of the think input and the rich experience they bring in. And thank you to our distinguished audience for joining us. We've received over 100 registrations, most of whom are CEOs, CXOs, and business heads. Many of them are repeat visitors to our webinars, which is very encouraging and motivates us to provide even higher levels of dialogue through the online channels as well. So for those of you who are new to us today, the Blue Circle is an exclusive network and ecosystem curated for business leaders to help them manage disruptive times and become future ready. We focus on 4 fundamental sectors, which are energy, e-mobility, real estate, and healthcare. We also present socioeconomic insights, which ultimately determine the evolving complexion of the market. In response to the COVID challenge, the Blue Circle has also accentuated its digital presence. One of the many modes we employ is our weekly webinar series and our digital publication. And in addition to this, and you will be happy to know that we are very soon launching an exclusive digital platform for leaders, somewhat like the LinkedIn for leaders, but that is just to set some context, wherein you will be able to present the opportunity of connecting with people just like yourselves, also house high quality curated content and meaningful conversations, and also access business opportunities within your sectors and allied sectors. So those leaders who are interested, please do write to us. We've begun our outreach and we plan to onboard about 1,000 to 2,000 members before we launch. And the topic for today is future of sustainable real estate. Buildings are among the largest consumers of raw materials and water, and equally large emitters of waste and greenhouse gases. Today's Blue Circle webinar would discuss if the construction activity, including materials used, upkeep and maintenance, energy and water consumption, waste management and repurposing, and demolition of buildings could be made more ecologically sensitive while keeping the business case attractive. We're privileged to have invited prominent practitioners and thought leaders from the sector. We have with us Dr. Ananya Gandotra, Head of Design and Sustainability, Birla Estates; Mr. Anubhav Gupta, Business Head, Vikhroli, Head of CSR and Sustainability, Founder, GPL Design Studio, Godrej Properties; Ms. Mili Majumdar, Senior Vice President, US Green Building Council; Ms. Sunita Purushottam, Head of Sustainability, Mahindra Lifespaces; Mr. Prashant Kapoor, Chief Industry Specialist, Green Buildings and Cities, International Finance Corporation. And the chair and moderator for the session is Mr. Pavan Choudary, best-selling author, CEO French multinational Vigon India, Chairman MTI, and sits on several boards across the country. Welcome, sirs and ma'am, for joining us today. Kindly note that we will have Q&A towards the end of the session. Some of you have already shared excellent questions. They're already with the moderator. And now I request Mr. Choudary to please chair and moderate the session, sir.
Thank you very much, Siddharth. And I will try my best to weave the questions in the talk track also. So one of the biggest consumers of energy and non-renewable resources, as you said, is real estate. It is also the biggest emitter of greenhouse gases, water effluents, and biggest generator of solid wastes. So the drive for sustainable real estate is not new. It has been on for many decades. This is one point which I would like to know a little more on through Prashant. Before that, I would like to just perimeter this discussion, because this wide topic then would become more manageable. The stakeholders we are addressing are investors, designers, developers, property owners, regulators, users, and the wider community. And the words which we will use, sustainable real estate, let us use it narrowly as synonymous with green buildings. So let us discuss whether we are calling it sustainable real estate or green buildings. Let us assume we are talking about green buildings. So with this short preamble, I ask Prashant to tell us what has been the historical development of sustainable real estate as a philosophy, as an idea, as an initiative all over the world. And then we will home in on India. Prashant.
Thanks, Pavan. Nice to be here with all of you. So, if you step back, and think about buildings historically, just about all our buildings were sustainable, right? We used to build with natural materials, live in, the context was fairly rural, and even when it did get a bit urban, barely some lights were being used in our buildings. It was pretty minimal. Then came, a few things, right? Urbanization in a big way, particularly through the industrial age, right? In Europe mostly, and then spread across to US. And then with urbanization came air conditioning, in about 1920s between the walls. And that really changed our perspective. And that changed our relationship with our buildings and the building's relationship with the outside, right? So that, because it allowed us to be a little bit independent of what is happening outside. And then if you pop it all, our energy consumption, our energy supply actually has also changed. So, it became surplus from coal, it became gas, power stations. I remember going through some of the old projects in Europe, and some of them didn't even have a meter because they thought eventually electricity would be priceless. Nuclear power was coming, the world was going to go down that path, right? So it was pretty much consumption, urbanization, and affluence was driving the growth. And then came 70s, right? The oil crisis, at least in the West. And that really shook the US and the West generally, the oil problems. Oil is not directly connected to electricity in buildings, but that got them thinking about how they're using energy. And suddenly, most of these buildings during the modern age weren't really being managed very well, energy efficiency wise. And that put their, attention back into energy efficiency. And that whole progress started on. That kind of took a few patterns, the kind of bioclimatic design and kind of being closer to nature part, or even just making it more efficient. That conversation is where we are living now, where we are trying to fix the car or fix the bus, whilst it's moving, right? So, everything, all the momentum of urbanization, affluence, energy consumption is all still moving, and the green building sits on it and tries to manage it somewhat. So I can go further, but I think I just want to set the context as to where we are. And just one quick touch on India, in this space, if I may. Is that okay?
Please. You're going beautifully. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I think in the Indian context, our quintessential Indian house, was a courtyard, right? With tall ceilings, perhaps, with natural ventilation, and the feet was pretty cool because we walked barefoot. All of that made sense. And then came urbanization that's just the same way as everywhere else, perhaps delayed by a century or two, right? Through growth and all of that. But we mustn't forget that urbanization has done a lot of good for India too, right? So it has given opportunities to people. It has brought health and well-being in terms of opportunities, jobs, and all of that, right? So I think we just need to rethink what it means today in the context of India, in terms of could we really all afford to stay in a courtyard house in an urban setting? Probably not. So what is our today's kind of imagination of what that solution might be? Is kind of it's that conversation is what we're writing as a group now, as to how do we how do we relate to this?
Excellent point. What a beginning. You spoke about air conditioning, and I was reminded that the Prime Minister of Singapore, the legend, Lee Kuan Yew, said once that air conditioning is the greatest invention which science has provided, because it has made us unaffected by our weather. So, and that brought in energy energy, etc. came in, and dirty energy came in, and the Indian piece also you brought in. Another point I was thinking was Rachel Carson's book, The Silent Spring, which brought about the spotlight on environmentalism. And that was in 1960s. In 1970, the Environment Protection Agency was formed in US thanks to that. And because there are so many ladies today on the panel, and we are very happy having them, this word ecofeminism, where women got into the ecological advocacy piece, also came in after Rachel Carson. Beautifully put, Prashant. Now, I would actually first like to ask any other panelist who would like to add. I would like to ask any other panelist to set this context, anything we, Prashant or I, might have missed, to set this context of how sustainable buildings or green buildings agenda has progressed. Any other panelist, please? Anubhav?
Yeah, I mean, I can add, and thanks, Pavan, and thanks, Prashant, for the context. I'd say when we're looking at green buildings, the point one sometimes misses is one should look at it from a life cycle standpoint. So, you know, all the way from the beginning of due diligence, conception, through to design, construction, production of real estate, to its use, perhaps its responsible demolition or reuse, and so on. And I think when we look at it from that perspective, things often get more complex and difficult to manage, right? Because you're talking about managing a lifetime of a building, which could be anywhere between, I don't know, 60 to 100 years. And I think that is what is key, because if you look at only a snapshot, I think you don't necessarily do justice to the topic.
So design, construction, operation, maintenance, demolition, and reuse of those products, end-to-end spectrum has to be seen to assess life cycle impact on the environment of the building, as well as limit that damage, and also see how all these efforts can also make a financially attractive case, so that we are, because they say that you can't feed from an empty vessel. You should do good, but you also have to do well. If you cannot do well, then you will not be able to do good for long. Great point, Anubhav.
I just
Sunita.
want to add one more thing.
Sunita, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Mili.
Sorry, Mili.
Yeah, so just, you know, that buildings, they are not standalone objects, right? So they are within a context, like they are in a community, and buildings are occupied by people. So whenever we talk about buildings, you know, while we are talking about issues like energy, water, construction, demolition, this everything in one context, it is equally important to see that how the community where the building is positioned is also equally sustainable to support that, you know, because, and currently as we are going through the pandemic, it is equally important to, you know, remain socially connected, and green buildings within green communities provide that framework. So just to expand the context a little bit, and the other important thing which we should look at in a green building context is the health and aspect of the people. Buildings, you know, green buildings are also healthy buildings. They have better indoor environmental quality. For example, they have better daylight, they have better acoustic properties, they have better air quality inside, which is so crucial for people who are staying within it. So we should not lose sight of these key aspects as well while we are discussing green buildings.
Agreed. So users as stakeholders and community as stakeholders also should benefit. And that those becomes further engines or wind beneath the wings for green building cause. Sunita.
Yeah, so just wanted to add one aspect over here is the people who make the buildings. So the people are very important with respect to the buildings, and the social aspect associated with buildings is very important. The laborers and their health and well-being is important as well.
Very
so
good.
That's the point that I wanted to add.
Very, very good point made, and great point. So, Sunita, now let's begin with you and ask you as to what you think are the triggers for the green building initiative, which are propelling it forward. Sunita.
Yeah, so for a group like ours, Mahindra and Mahindra, and being the real estate arm of Mahindra and Mahindra, the key drivers are probably the commitments, global commitments that we have made with respect to the carbon related commitments. So whether it is becoming carbon neutral or setting science-based targets, these commitments have helped us drive action within our company. They are one of the key drivers. Apart from that, incentives do help, especially if you look at specific incentives by municipal corporations and the financial benefits that can be passed on to the homeowners definitely help strengthen the business case. And these two have been the key drivers for green buildings. Apart from that, being a thought leader in the space and initializing the Sustainable Housing Leadership Coalition, where even Godrej is a part of it, we have taken a pledge to have a 100% green building portfolio. So the public commitments do propel action and also provide the impetus within to mobilize the internal stakeholders to transform the business and deliver to the commitments that we have made. So, and science-based targets definitely help us quantify how we are going to reach there, what kind of buildings we should be making in order to get there. So these two are the key drivers. Yes.
Great, Sunita. So you're saying corporate tone decides your public commitment,
True.
Gets internal buy-ins, gets that status of thought leadership, and that is one main piece. And the other piece is favorable fiscal incentives. For example, access to creditors offering green loans at a better rate. Or even we have found in stock prices, companies have benefited through the green agenda. I remember there was a company called chlorofluorocarbons in US, which never made any chlorofluorocarbon, but it was called that, and its stock used to continue dipping after the environment agenda came in. So they decided to rename their company, and they did an analysis and simulation as to what name would best suit them. And finally, all the financial analysts and it said, decided on one name, and they called it that, and the stock came back zooming up. And you know what was the name? The name was not chlorofluorocarbon. So there is some fiscal incentive on the stock market also because of greater public awareness. Coming to Ananya. Ananya, what would you like to add to the triggers which Sunita has mentioned? So she has already covered corporate tone and commitment and favorable fiscal incentives. What else is driving this agenda forward?
I think, Pavan, the main driving force is, I would say, externalities. So when you are either in a real estate space or any other space, for example, it could be manufacturing or any other industrial sector, you are operating within an external factors. And thereby, to my mind, responsible stewardship which would have least impact of your project or your product onto the external factors is very important. The second most important factor, as for me, is perhaps the stakeholder engagement, and thereby to say, while you're doing reduce or you're reducing your impact on externalities, you are getting least impacted by external elements, and thereby you are able to mitigate it. For example, your supply chains or raw materials, for example. So impacts, or I would say legal environments that cement industry could have, or the steel industry could have. So how this entire environment where you are dependent on so many other supply chains, how you're mitigating it by being more sustainable and thereby future-proofing your business. So these are a few of very critical things that we want to kind of look into. And one of the ways is to understand the legal standards and for example, trying to aim towards international standards and see what other practices are doing across the globe. This is from the Indian perspective, what best practices they are following. And for example, in our sustainable environment, perhaps indoor air quality or well-being is not being highlighted, but soon it will be there in India as well. So these are kind of things that I feel that we need to be a step ahead than what the basic regulations or even the certification agencies of the local area are doing.
Great points. So you have added the external environment regulatory piece. The regulations will finally push the entire industry towards it. Otherwise, only the people who are aware and socially committed would go towards it. So this is one point which you have brought in. And the other point which you have brought in is that how is the ecosystem being governed? So if the ecosystem is also being governed more stringently, they will be more receptive to your objective of making a green building. So at the time of construction, the material which is coming, the off-site module making, etc., also should be pushed through comprehensive regulations for not only the builder but also the ecosystem. Very good point, Ananya. Let me come to Mili. Mili, you are at the center of this drive, pushing it forward, which Ananya just spoke of. So what are your comments on the triggers?
Yeah, so, of course, everybody has spoken about all the triggers. I would speak from the perspective that the sector that I represent, primarily the certification bodies. And here, I represent the US Green Building Council, and we are the global, administering body and the development body for LEED as a rating system. LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And it is there in 176 countries. And our experience, and of course, Prashant is there on the panel. So he has developed within the International Financial Corporation a very, very, robust rating system called EDGE, which is very easy to use and has been very largely adopted in several countries. So what we see as stakeholders in this space is that another important trigger for green buildings is the rating systems. And here we find that people, anything, what we say is that whenever you are saying you are green, you need to measure yourself. Unless you are quantifiably green, you cannot say for sure that you are green. So rating systems provide you that framework where you can quantify, measure, and say that you're performing well, and also have a continuous performance path. So that is one. And the other thing what we see is a peer-to-peer comparison, So the need to strive to set a target, meet it, and be better than the peers. So that is also a very important trigger. And rating systems such as LEED and EDGE also has been able to provide that. And the other trigger has been the market transformation, initiative. So over the years, we have seen that there has been several technologies, products, which have definitely proven to save, for us, say, save energy, water, provide better air quality, etc., which are genuinely good for us. So these triggers, these market transformative initiatives have also provided the necessary trigger, in addition to the regulations, the awareness, the need to save energy, the need to have a better occupant health, productivity, etc.
Excellent. So you brought in two things. You brought in the market fit and you brought in product. So market fit is market transformation, what is the competition doing, etc. So you have to be in step with the changes which are happening, or the demand patterns of consumers which are changing. Secondly, you have brought product also, like you spoke about lower operating costs. So if you have lower operating costs, coming back to the argument which I made earlier, you can even get higher rents if energy costs are lower. And secondly, you brought in building values also, and that was brought in by an earlier panelist also. So worker satisfaction is better if indoor quality of air is better, and connection of health indices with worker satisfaction and quality of the building is quite strong. So any other point, Anubhav? And then I come back to Prashant to start discussing the speed breakers or the headwinds. Anubhav.
Yeah, just a quick couple of points. For us, really, it's a simple thing. We want to try and do the right thing. And in the current context, looming climate change, I feel that as a real estate industry sector and one of the leaders, I think we can make a strong impact. Now, we are a 123-year-old company. We have been very proactive stewards of Bombay's mangroves, as you know. And at the corporate level, very quickly to touch upon, there are three or four big things that we always that prompt us to look at this in this proactive way. We want to be a water positive company. We want to be carbon neutral. We want to minimize waste to landfill. We want to try and achieve at least 30% of our consumption from renewable sources, right? Now, that flows down to every group company. And in real estate, I think what is critical is the way we've defined it is we want to be sustainable across our 7 P's is how we call it, right? People, process, product, partnership, place, profit, and planet, right? Now, the reason why I say it like this is because it's easy to understand, it's catchy. A lot of the work that our team does also tends to be, we need to be able to influence all the stakeholders of real estate, right? So within each of these parameters, we dig deep down. Like, for example, let's say partnership, right? Real estate is a very complicated value chain. We will work with contractors, we will work with a whole bunch of other people. So it is very critical for us and our partners to be able to also have the same value set in order to influence these things. Of course, green buildings are important. We've said we, like Mahindra, we've said 100% of our portfolio will be green. Every building that we do will at least be silver certified, if not gold and platinum. And, for me personally, I think what is the big interest area that has emerged for me is the economic argument of this. I really strongly believe that this can be a win-win proposition. And for us to be able to, by data analytics, by measurement, by showing that, look, this is a win-win proposition for all the stakeholders that you identified, Pavan, that we can do the right thing for the environment. So those are the areas that are driving us currently. And we are very, very optimistic and very bullish about, the new generation, as it were, to take on some of these and make a real difference.
Great points. In fact, you have highlighted how an organization like Godrej is pushing this agenda forward through multi-foci arguments, as well as comprehensively pushing it in every space through that P7 example which you gave. And that's really wonderful. And you have also gone in partnership with CII and founded IGBC. That is also a great initiative of yours. Mahindra, Birla, IFC, all of them are also similarly walking on that track. And that is Another great point about this panel, that all of them are pioneers, including Sunita's company, are pioneers in this space. So great. Coming to Prashant. Prashant, can you tell us something about Edge? Because you have also done a lot of work in this area, IFC. And then start with the speed breakers.
May I change the order?
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, because I think, yeah, so just, if you can.
Please.
Okay, so I think just to step back again, what is the problem, right? There are lots of problems. Of course, when it comes to buildings, we talked about bad health, economics, affordability, the hundreds of different issues. But the core issue that I wanted to bring up was, the fact that buildings today are causing 30% of climate change issues. Okay? And it's not a simple fix. It's not like you can just, it's not like renewable energy. You can dump something and you can find the way out. This is a really tricky problem because on one hand, a lot of projects already built and you can't go door to door and improve these projects. How on earth is one supposed to do that, right? The other problem is the new construction. Okay, that's a slightly easier one because you've got developers here who can take the leadership. And these are some of the good ones who are really pushing hard and setting, as Ananya and others have said, putting commitments and putting, Anubhav was talking about zero carbon, all of that forward, right? But I think the issue is, how do you scale this, right? How do you get it from the 1% that may be able to do this at the premier level or, at the leadership level? How do you get this across? But I'll come back to how later. That's really the big issue, I feel, because if we don't tackle that in the next 10 years, India is going to double in building stock. And if we don't tackle that building stock growth, we are pretty much done. There'll be no social issues to worry about, if you know what I mean, because it'll be such a disaster in terms of the climate change impact. And India will face the brunt of it, right? So let's start. I feel like there are three main, possibly four, if I can last that long, kind of headwinds. Okay, one is the perception of cost. Okay. This is a big one, and I think as Sunita was saying earlier, that through this association of some pioneering kind of developers, we're trying to tackle this issue as to how much does it cost to build green. But the perception in the market is that it's about 30% more expensive. When in reality, it's close to 0.5% or 2%, that sort of level, right? So it's a marginal cost of construction, not even the whole cost of sale. So it's not as big as most people think it is, especially if they do it early in the design stage and build it in, right? That's one. The second is, and I think Anubhav mentioned this, the economic argument or knowledge, I would call it, right? Sort of, this is not a big issue. Most people inherently know that leaving windows open and putting air conditioning on is bad. So it's not like they don't know, but they probably don't have all the numbers at their fingertips. If they had to choose, where would they put it? That's one. And the last one is one which is very, kind of unique to buildings, is this circle of blame issue, which is everybody, as you mentioned, the ecosystem, everybody blames the other, right? So if you ask the home buyers, if you ask yourself, right, if you were looking to buy a house, would you go for the same price, same location? Would you not go for energy efficient house? Of course they will, right? Who in the right mind will say, I don't believe in climate change and I will pick the most expensive thing, right? So, or the operating wise. So but if you ask the developer, they don't seem to get it. They're waiting for the investors to tell it. So it's a broken, asymmetry of information, if you like. And that is the core issue that I feel one has to tackle. And I think, and that there has to be the economic argument, but there also has to be unbroken communication and trust. Okay, so when somebody originates a project, that the home buyer should be able to trust that it's actually good. And then the whole cycle continues. The investors should trust that they would actually make a profit and all of that, right? And the bank has to trust that they'll get the money back, after spending a little bit more. So with this in context, we felt that as IFC, we wanted to push it from our side. We are a development agency, right, part of the World Bank Group. And so we felt there was a gap. And there was some really good leadership from LEAD and others that did really well at the sort of the higher end of the market at that time, particularly in the offices space. But the mass market, we needed to create something that would really push that forward. And that's what led us to create Edge. And just, not more than 1 minute. It has three main parts. There's a software, and it's free for anyone to use. And it helps you do the investment planning. Whether you're an architect or a home buyer or a developer or a bank, you go in, you choose your type of building. It tells you, what sort of things you can do and how much it will cost. And we have teamed up, with various people, including US Green Building Council, who are our main body pushing it through. So this has to be done through partnerships, as Anubhav was saying, one of the P's, right? So we need to find ways to scale this up. Then we really kind of refocused the standard. Okay, what I meant was not to say other issues are not important, but we had to, for climate change's sake, we had to refocus it back into resource efficiency, what you started with, energy, water, materials, which matters quite a lot, particularly in developing countries where energy is not a cost issue alone. It's a power cut issue. It's about convenience. It's about tankers coming in. It's all of those issues, right? And then finally, how do we trust the whole system? The circle is broken, as we talked about it. And developers, historically claim, and some rightly and some wrongly, and everybody claims this, right? That they're good. So you need a system where there's a third-party check who would come and check, and that's where Mili's organization really helps in bringing that credibility in that system, where a home buyer who buys a piece of, property knows that it's green, and has some faith in it. Yeah. I'll stop with that.
Great point. So I think one of the points which you have really highlighted is for the ecosystem, every stakeholder blames the other, which leads to a lot of inertia from every stakeholder. So I am reminded of a couplet, माना कि अंधेरा है घना, माना कि अंधेरा है घना, किसने कहा दिया जलाना है मना, which means we accept that it is dark everywhere, but who has told you that you cannot light your small candle? Which means companies like Mahindra, like Godrej, like Birla, like IFC are lighting that small lamp. And also you are saying that Edge, you're not only presenting the problem, you are saying that Edge has these softwares. So you don't have to go for a high capitally intensive BIM. You can get some kind of a figure analysis as to how much more it will cost and how much more efficiency or productivity it will bring. So the 3 points which you have made, these 3 speed breakers are: perception of cost is much higher than actual cost. Second is awareness. And third is everybody blames the other. What would you like to add to that, Sunita? The speed breakers, which Prashant has mentioned.
Yeah, so I would like to get in the regulatory aspect with respect to the speed breakers, especially since the provision of, for those who will go for a green certification or a provisional green certification, there is a rush for getting these certificates and actual certification is not happening. So the speed breaker, in a sense, for those who are actually doing the whole gamut of things and delivering the green buildings, vis-a-vis a bunch of developers who are going for the provisional certificate and not going delivering the impact. So I think the impact measurement of green building and the performance of green building needs to be measured completely, because if we are not delivering what we have said we would deliver, there has to be a mechanism to monitor that, and so through a regulatory mechanism to say that whatever I'm saying and whatever I have put out in my brochure, as a result of which my environment clearance has hastened up, I should be able to deliver that. And the other speed breaker, and I'll build on the point which Prashant has mentioned about the awareness. I think it is many developers believe that there is no demand for green buildings, right? And in my mind, I feel that it could be actually an excuse not to sell green, because many of the new age products that we have, especially in technology, there was no demand in the first place. Or even if you look at Ola or Uber, that demand is all generated. So anything that we bring about, that demand generation is the responsibility of the product company that is making it. So these two are the top things in my mind, that, what is the regulatory mechanism which holds all developers accountable, that when they have said that they will go for a green building certification, it has to be what it is, written in the certification, and it has to be audited, and the performance should be, proven to the customers who are buying it. And the other is that the generation of the demand is the responsibility of the producer of the product, so that they are attracted to buy the sheer benefits of the product. And in fact, the products accrue to the owner, the customer, more than the developer. So these are the two things I feel that needs work, and needs a mechanism for, accountability in the first place. And in the other one, it is more about how we can get people on board. For whoever wants to buy a home should be totally aware that an energy efficient home and a responsible home is much better for the larger ecosystem.
Fascinating insights. Truly fascinating. You have said that provisional green certificate allows people to claim advantages just through a pretense of going green or temporary pretense of going green, which should be checked. Absolutely. Secondly, you have said, and this, for example, this pattern is found not only here. In data centers also it is there. You have data centers where the highest tier has the highest number of redundancies. So companies are, the unscrupulous company is claiming to be the highest tier with highest level of redundancy in the beginning, because in the beginning, the occupancy rate or what the final capacity is going to be is low. So you are very redundant. You have a lot of redundancies. But as you go forward, they go down, but they have claimed the advantage of being a high tier redundancy data center. Very good point. And the second point, which I love, is that the builders are saying there's no demand. So Adam Smith had said, availability creates its own demand. That means if you will bring as a conscious leader good products, the demand will come. Once Picasso was asked that you make these very grotesque paintings, somebody's head is cut, somebody's torso is cut. Why do you do that? He says, this is how the society is. This is what the society wants. It was a smart answer, but it was not a responsible answer. Because as a leader of the society, you have to give to the society something which is good for it in such a palatable format that it starts taking it, accepting it. Otherwise, you can say gladiator games were the right things to have, because that time people wanted violent entertainment. But some conscious leader came and decided no Olympics or other games will be equally exciting. And we will drop this and bring those and sell them well. Very beautiful point made, Sunita. I hope this webinar through Blue Circle will go to a lot of developers who will be encouraged through your argument to try to bring a stock of green buildings, and automatically the demand, I'm sure, will come. Great points. Ananya, what would you like to add to the speed breakers? I can't hear you, Ananya.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. So touching base on Sunita's point, I of course agree that for any good intention there has to be a successful implementation. A good case is Aadhaar in our country. So something, if you get in a legislation and if you're not able to follow it through properly, it is definitely a failure. And some of us could call other policies as failures in its implementation. But I do want to see the sustainable legislations, whichever way, or I would say rather crossovers between, let's just say, MOEF or RERA, or even USGBC, IGBC, GREHA, to happen. Because the intention of all these companies by large or organizations are similar, is to do better for the planet. So one, I'm for that. And second, of course, there will be few people who will misuse it, in whatever format. Just want to draw a small comparison between, I would say, municipal approvals, which is also a part of a regulatory body, how it was in Mumbai some time back. And there was a few developers and of course few practicing architects who misused it by reading between the lines and trying to figure out how to misuse it. What happened in this particular new development regulations is the extreme end of the spectrum. That means any and every developer is seen with a lens of doubt. That means to say, you are going to exploit the FSI, you are going to misuse whatever is being given to you free. So now we don't want the sustainability to follow the same route as the DCR for FSI has happened, especially in the case of Mumbai. So in that sense, I would say perhaps auditors and self-assessments and those kind of things could come useful. And very stringent norms for people who are defaulting on it. For example, your licenses could be taken away or whatever, something like that could happen. But to say that because there are going to be a set of defaulters, which are going to be in the fray to exploit that situation, we shouldn't get it. I don't agree with that. So I do feel that legislation is very important. Another thing which I just want to bring to notice is that in the sustainability sector, especially for small developers, who are not like large organized players like us, is where to get materials which are more sustainable, how to actually do good construction practices. For example, the industry of re-rolled steel, scrap steel, it's not so advanced, meaning however much these developers or small construction companies might want to procure good quality re-rolled steel, it's not so easy. And authenticity of that is not easy. So the other standards which are there for quality, should also come into being for materials which are more sustainable, be it ash, availability of good ash across the country, or re-rolled steel, where they can actually dispose of waste. MOEF would say you have to do it responsibly, or the municipal corporation will say you have to do it responsibly. But there have to be channels for people to take it up much easily and be able to execute. And last point that I would like to make is, I was reading somewhere that internationally people in neighborhoods can actually, I would say, monitor, or they can assess how green they are. Or how green their refrigerator is, for example, or how green their living is. So perhaps, companies like USGBC, they can create small apps where people could, feed in data. They can, because major guzzlers is not during construction, but during operation phase. So during operation phase, if people who are living in their homes be able to get some kind of assessment done, through very friendly apps like, you have the EMI apps or the BMI apps and things like that, how green you are and how sustainable you are as a household. I think those kind of things would also kind of not just create an environment, but make people much more aware what it is to be more sustainable.
Excellent points. So you have said, you added to what Sunita said. You said, greater consciousness and confidence in the builder is important. developer is important. Having said that, legislation is also required, and legislation should be more thorough so that the unintended consequences of it being misused by the unscrupulous actor, those are minimized, but it should not be halted because it will be misused by some, because some people will find a way of misusing even the best intended schemes. That is one point. Second point you have made is awareness. Awareness is important. Legislation is important. At the same time, availability of those material which you are legislating should be used, etc., also is important. So just through publicity and legislation, you will not be able to push this comprehensively. You have to make sure that the ecosystem of manufacturing of raw material, etc., which are consumed by the builders is available. And the last point is, you have said that awareness will go up if there are ready metrics. If people are engaged in measuring something, they will become more conscious of it and more receptive to it. Great points. Coming to Mili. Mili, what would you like to add to the speed breakers to sustainable or green buildings?
So I think, again, everybody has said, most of the things. I would like to add two more things. One is to say that, when we kind of plan and design buildings, it is a very varied play of things. There are many actors that are involved, many stakeholders. Like you have, even when you're talking about green buildings, you're talking about materials, you're talking about occupant health, you're talking about energy efficiency, you're talking about waste management, you're talking about water efficiency. And each of them is a field of expertise and knowledge in itself. And they are all interconnected. When you are designing, they are all interconnected. Like, if you design a building in a better way, say by harnessing sunlight, daylight, etc., then you will use less energy. But in first place, if you do not do it well, then obviously you will end up using more energy. So which means that at the outset, this calls for something called an integrated approach to the whole design. And often we find that in the green building design process, it is an afterthought, whatever reason be it, be it that it's a regulatory push which comes later, or the developer must have thought about it later. Many a times, I'm not saying every time, it's an afterthought. So you would have lost a lot of opportunities to save and haven't taken advantage of that integrated approach. So it's very, very crucial that early starters, that you are able to start in the process. Then only you can get the maximum benefit and do it at a least cost. So that is point number one. And the other important thing, what I find in this field is, and personally, I was part of the committee that does environmental clearance in India for several years, and I have seen how projects come for clearance and what they depict as green. So I find there is a serious disconnect between design and operation. So what happens when a builder or a developer is design getting the clearances and making the building? So maybe he or they are providing for a lot of these things which they have committed to, say a sewage treatment plant for for clarifying the water and getting it reused in the system, or say maybe a solar photovoltaic system to generate renewable energy power. But once it gets handed over to the users, then there is a gap. I'll give you one example. In one of the projects, which we had rated, when I was in Griha. So we found that when during the rating, there was a solar power plant installed, because they had to do it for the incentive, and they had to do it for getting points on the rating system. But once they handed it over to the Resident Welfare Association, they did not have the budget or the money to even operate it. So what they did was, first they disconnected it, then they went ahead and sold it. Similarly, we found a lot of such things with things like, say, water treatment plant or sewage treatment plant, that if you do not build the operational cost of these things within the overall budget, then, in the long run, even if you have provision for it, you cannot benefit. Other, one very glaring example, like when we write building specifications, when we design building, a tender is out and there are certain things that are laid out. But the first thing, because of the cost issue that will get cut, is some of this energy efficiency thing. So the entire benefit that you would like to accrue gets lost. So I think, these two things are very, very important, that how you connect the dots, how you connect design to operational efficiency, to see that whatever you have designed is sustained throughout its lifetime and the performance is maintained and bettered. And people who are responsible for operating know that it is a green building. Many green buildings you may walk into, you will ask 5 occupants, maybe 3 of them they do not know that they are operating out of a green building. And in the first principle, to do this integrated design approach to get the maximum benefit. I would like to add these two things.
Excellent point. In fact, you have illuminated the space from the certifier or regulator's point of view, which was very good because he was missing here and we were not hearing his voice. You have said, first of all, design and operational efficiency, it should be well coordinated, coherent. And you have said that whatever is started should live its life. It should not so happen that because you have not factored in the costs, or you have not created enough awareness, or you have not created enough rules for the users or the facility managers also to follow those things which you have brought in, they abandon them and they sell them off as junk. So, beautiful point. What would you like to add to this, Anubhav?
Well, one of the disadvantages of going, at the end is a lot of these things are covered. But I think Mili's point is an interesting segue to what I would like to perhaps talk about. You see, when we, it's the use side or the customer side, and I was very keen to understand this side personally. So when we went out and talked to our customers, right, they simply said that, look, firstly, all of this sounds like technical jargon. We don't even understand what all of this is. We don't even know what the benefits are. I mean, how the hell do we make sense? Are we actually paying for this? Is it costing us extra? So on and so forth. And the barrage of questions were like, So I'd like to use a few easy to relate to examples which we've been using, which have been successful to drive the point home, as it were, right? So indulge me for the next minute or so, right? We said that, look, okay, when in India you go out and buy a car, you say kitna average degi. So like that, if you thought about your home, you would ask efficiency-based questions. Now, what does that mean? That means that, okay, does this cost more? And, like Prashant said, and this is hard data, I can tell you as a developer, it costs anywhere between 2 to 5 to maybe even 7% of cost of construction more to build a green building. Okay, not a whole lot. All right. Now, as conscious developers, we are doing that in any way, any case. We are not necessarily seeing the benefits of it, or people who are willing to pay extra. Now, relate this back to a car example, right? Would you buy a Honda versus a, whatever it is, an American gas guzzler? All right. Now, once they have bought the property, no one's or very few people are telling them how to use this property in a way that will give them benefits. And what are the benefits, right? So we said, okay, how do we do this? Can we just make a simple manual? When you buy a TV, you get a manual. So let's make a manual that tells you that if you use your house or your equipment in this way, chances are you will see that your water bill is low, your energy bill is low over the year, so on and so forth. So, okay, interesting. Now, what was missing? Measurement was missing. So how do you measure that, firstly, how much is your water bill? How much is your electricity bill? What is the baseline? What is a green building and what is not a green building? So we said, okay, how do we do that? So, in the market, there are a lot of home automation companies. Now, they make a living by doing what? Like, you can sit in this room and put on the light or flush the toilet and do all these kind of funky things. We said, instead, can we work with them and say that, can you tell me I put my AC on for 2 hours, how much electricity I used? What does that equate to in terms of money spent or my water or something like that, right? Now, if the measurement is in place in front of the customer, they can see the benefits accrue to them. And I think that is key. Another point is, innovation. I think there's a lack of innovation, or maybe there's a lack of focus on innovation in this space. The kind of things we've looked at, and these are not very rocket science examples. We said we're going to provide so much green area, for example. Now, can that green area or landscape area be a productive landscape? We did that in our development. We've got a development called the trees. We did that. And funny enough, in this COVID environment, about 30% of the food, fruit and herbs, people are harvesting from that urban farm in the lawn area itself. And these are just troughs, right? Now, imagine the benefit of this if we were able to scale this up, right? We've talked about things like solar power street lamps and all of these things. And what's interesting in this is, if one pilot is successful over our portfolios, if we extrapolate the benefit, I mean, it's crazy, right? It's crazy for us in terms of, in a good way, to build this, and the benefits are even more exponential for the customers. And one last thing I'd like to say is, this economic argument has to be tight. I think in one of the earlier panels, I was actually discussing with Prashant, in the UK, if I go out and rent an apartment, the renter or the real estate agent actually gives me a rating of the apartment. Now, you will find that in a building, if there are two exactly same apartments and the ratings are different, the rentals will be different. Meaning the one which is more efficient will have a better or a higher rental than the one which is less efficient. And if you look at it, if you equate that over a year or 3 years or 5 years of lease, the market is efficient, right? Now, if that argument can also be presented to the customer, it's like owning an asset which is going to, increase your capital values and all of this. So it's not even speculative. It is real hard data. So, these are the kind of points I think are important to make and show. If we are able to show it, I see no reason why this cannot be a really efficient marketplace for the customers, of course, but also on the other side, from an investment point of view. I mean, we are seeing this in commercial real estate anyway, whether it's foreign institutional investors and so on. So I'm, again, very optimistic, but slowly and cautiously, I guess. And to my colleagues, we are on some consortiums together, and I feel that together, we can make a big difference.
Absolutely. Very well played. Last over. You said that you were last down, so things have exhausted for you, but we kept you deliberately here. Of course, in a woman-heavy panel, one of you had to be here. We kept you deliberately here because we knew that you are such a good batsman that you can handle the last over. Okay, great point. So the point which you have made is very interesting. You have said that the industry has not concept sold sustainable buildings and energy efficient buildings and their advantages in a concrete, comprehensive manner. And we need to do that selling. I was reminded when washing machine came into India, Videocon came with an ad which was very basic, but it said what all it does. It says, I remember the jingle, Videocon washing machine, it washes, it rinses, it even dries your clothes. In just a few minutes, you are ready for the show. So people did not know that it also dries the clothes, it also rinses, So we also need to tell our customers that in terms of electricity bill, so much less you will get because the building is well planned as far as the solar exposure is concerned, or it is better insulated. And then you will also be generating part of the electricity through the solar panel. So that will not be charged to you from the grid. Then it will be a smart home. So all the rooms where the lights need not to be on or the fans need not to be on, they will not be on. They will automatically heat sense the presence of people and switch off, etc. All these things have to be sold very well. And for that, again, the onus lies on the industry as well as on the government. Great point you made, Anubhav. Very good last shots. So to sum this up, what I would like to say is that as far as speed breakers are concerned, we have speed breakers coming from every segment. First one is the speed breaker, which I think Sunita referred to. Everybody is expecting the other person to start, the other stakeholder to start. Then we have, as far as the ecosystem is concerned, we don't have that material. The legislation is not in place. They are not thoroughly thought through. Then the users are also not sold to the concept, nor even asked, nor even taught how to use this concept most profitably, which leads to people abandoning the energy, the energy efficient piece or the sustainable piece. The community has also to be taught. Great. So I think through the discussion, we covered most of the questions which came in. Also, we covered very well, thanks to such an informed panel, and also a very good audience which was sending me the questions on WhatsApp, as well as most of them who joined have stayed back, which means they are also as informed and keen to understand new things which you presented. Great points, superb panel, superb audience. I will pass it on now to Siddharth.
Thank you very much, sirs and ma'am. Our leaders and I have taken home so many excellent nuggets from today's conversation, and very well moderated, Mr. Choudary. I'm still receiving messages from our leaders on LinkedIn and over email. And thank you to our attendees and members for staying till the end. Along with our weekly webinar series, we will also soon be taking these discussions on the exclusive digital networking platform, which we're curating specifically for leaders. We've begun sending out select invitations to over 2,000 leaders across our 4 sectors, which are real estate, energy, e-mobility, and healthcare. Whether you would like to engage with us on our expert panel or as learners, our leaders are invited to connect with us for membership to join the real estate circle. All the details for CXO engagement are also available on the bluecircle.co, and where you can engage with us and see all our material. So thank you again, leaders in the audience and our distinguished panel. We look forward to more such discussions in the future.
Okay, one question has come up and I have to answer this because this has not been covered. I'm reading it out and I will take this to Prashant. Would it not be good to have a representation from a not so professional real estate developer? The points mentioned are a perception of the esteemed panel members and could be more worthy of consideration. Basically, what he's saying is that, or the questioner is saying it, is that these are the large developers. What about the mid-sized developers or the smaller developers? Would it not have been more inclusive to have their views also, because they are the ones who are, I'm assuming that this is where he's coming from, they are the ones who are reluctant to get on to this sustainable building bandwagon for good reasons. Prashant. And what are you doing for them?
It's a good point, actually. I mean, 2 things there. It resonates, that question, because, if you look at India's building industry, it's still pretty informal, right? I mean, most of rural, and if you take it from there to the semi-urban, peripheral, and then, so it gets, a lot of people still do self-construction, right? They might get a mistri to come and construct something. So there's still that sort of industry. And it is a challenge. I mean, I realized it really when we started to work with banks in India. And actually, we're trying to come up with some products for these kind of builders and these kind of developers. It is a bigger challenge. There's no other way to put this, right? If you can't get the most sophisticated ones to go that way, then you have no hope. But so I think the issue is that, a lot of these smaller developers borrow money from microfinance institutions and those kind of things like Avas, and we're working with them now, trying to lend them money to see if we can scale this up and coming up with, I think somebody mentioned a simpler tool where they can quickly figure out what works. we've got edge for somebody who's at least from the professional industry, but somebody who's not. They probably need images to kind of get a sense of what to choose in their house, and should I have a chajja, or what? You have to change the vocabulary in some way. So that has to be done. It is a challenge, and I think I just wanted to add one more thing there. Actually, is that India is unique. Actually, I find compared to most developing countries, right? So although our tendency tends to be towards regulations, it's probably the least effective vehicle for us. I mean, just look at it, right? We've had energy efficiency building codes sitting there since 2007. Mili, you know this, right? ECBC barely being implemented. Most of the regulatory mechanisms, they're all meant in good spirit. They really work well in China, this kind of regulatory mechanism. Our strength is our market. Our strength is our private sector. And we really have to find a way to leverage that to make it work. As Anubhav was saying, if you can find the economic argument, if you can find the business argument, that has to be the way. The kitna deti hai has to be the way that it works for India. Anyway, forgive me. I went off.
Excellent answer. Basically, what you're saying is that the larger players have the ability to board the wagon quickly. And that is why you are addressing them. You also know that if they board the wagon for economic reasons, the smaller or mid-sized players will automatically follow. And not that you are not looking at the mid-sized or smaller players, you are also engaging through microfinance, etc., with them so that they can also board this wagon quickly. And if there is an economic argument, as you said, it makes a lot of sense. So great, very good answers. And sorry, it was a lady, Nivedita, who asked this question and not a he. And thank you very much. There are other questions also, but I will leave that to Siddharth to address them to the appropriate panelists offline. Siddharth.
Certainly. So thank you very much once again, and we look forward to having such discussions in the future. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
Pavan, and thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you.